Yes, it is. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're going to have a little bit of time to let folks filter in, but thank you. We're going to have a good conversation today. Probably get started in about a minute or so. Hope everybody's having a wonderful day, wonderful conclusion to your day. If we have any NFL fans out there, the draft is tonight, so hopefully no Bears fans. I'm a Packer fan, so we don't cheer for those Bears, but they're gonna. Caleb Williams is gonna get drafted and see what happens.
I forgot that was tonight. He's already probably been drafted, right? Has it started?
I think so, yeah. But we're gonna preemptively boo him, just in case. But
Yep.
we're excited that you guys chose us over the NFL draft or the NBA playoffs today as well too. So thank you. Gonna give it about another 30 or so seconds before we get started. And as you guys are filtering in, please drop your name, location in the chat, and when you went through third decade so that everybody can know when you have the opportunity to go through this program as well. All right, just another couple seconds. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We're really excited. This is one of our concluding events of our amazing Alumni Week, which was an opportunity for us to be able to celebrate folks who've gone through third decade and be able to get some questions answered from some of our experts that work with us here at Third Decade and some of our amazing partners as we talk about some of the things that are top of mind for our alumni. We've had two good sessions already, and today we're going to have just kind of a Q&A. It's going to be a lot of questions that we've gotten from alumni and from current participants just about things in the financial world that are really affecting you all currently, and we hope that these questions are relevant for you and you take a lot out of it as well too. This conversation will be recorded and we're going to be sharing it with our alumni base as well too. So just as I mentioned, a couple of things. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, drop your name, your location, and when you went through their decade so everybody knows. And feel free to engage in the chat too. We want this to be a cool, fun thing for you all tonight. So if there's something that resonates with you, let us know so that we can respond to that as well too. But if there's a specific question you have, we're hoping to have some time for questions at the end. So drop that in the section that says Q&A, either at the top or the bottom of your Zoom. So specific questions that you want the panel to answer should go in the Q&A. Everything else can kind of go in the chat. So as we get started, I just really want to send a big thank you to our sponsors who have allowed us to really have a wonderful week so far. CLA Accountants, Pima Federal Credit Union, and Impaqua Bank. It's because of their generosity and their sponsorship that we're able to offer these workshops, and we're really excited to have partners that really care about our mission and want to help us elevate what we're doing at Third Decade for our alumni and for our current participants. So thank you to all of our sponsors as well. So now it's the fun time. I get to introduce all of our amazing panelists. We're calling this the experts because all these folks know a lot in their fields, in their areas of choice, and they're taking their time tonight to share some of their expertise with us and answer some questions. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce these folks just to start off. So I'm going to start with our wonderful founder, who many of you all know, Bob Swift. So Bob Swift is the founder of TCI Wealth Advisors and Third Decade. And throughout his career, Bob has been passionate about serving clients and educating others about the financial industry, especially those who typically do not have the opportunity for financial guidance. Bob received his Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Kansas, as you can see from his shirt, which he attended on a football scholarship. Bob and his wife, Lisa, and their two grown children, Sam and Jessica, are avid supporters of the University of Arizona and the Tucson community as well. Bob is very young at heart and enjoys everything that an aging athlete can, including tennis, golf, hiking, and a lot of reading on the treadmill at the gym. Say hi, Bob.
Hello to everybody. It's fun talking to you all again.
Next, we have Gene Madsen. Gene is a senior vice president of retail banking and a regional manager at Umpqua Bank. Gene started working in the financial services industry by accident. What initially started as a full-time job in which he could work during the day and attend Georgia State University at night became a lifelong passion of helping clients, communities, and associates grow and prosper. Gene's career spans 37 years in retail banking for 6 different financial institutions in 5 states. In 2015, Gene joined Umpqua Bank, headquartered in Lake Oswego, Oregon, and presently holds the role of Senior Vice President and Retail Regional Manager for the Southern California and developing markets. Arizona and Colorado make up the developing markets for Umpqua Bank as it expands beyond the Pacific Northwest. Gene has had the privilege of working with numerous nonprofit organizations over the years, from grassroots organizations such as the Dream Factory in Oregon, the Civics Learning Project, the Portland Rescue Mission, Habitat for Humanity of Walton County, Florida, and various chambers of commerce. Say hi, Gene.
Hey, good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Next is Isabel Williams. Isabel is the head of product management and a vice president in Dimensional's Austin office. Isabel leads the global product management team within the Investment Solutions Group, which is responsible for supporting the effective communication of Dimensional's investment approach and strategies to clients and prospective clients. Isabel also sits on Dimensional's ESG Steering Committee and Sustainable Operations Task Force. Isabel holds a bachelor's degree in economics and liberal arts from the University of Notre Dame. Say hi, Isabel.
Hi, everyone. So excited to be here with you tonight.
Thank you. And last but not least is Nick Pieria. I think I just butchered that already, Nick. I'm sorry. Nick is a family housing resource program counselor for the homeownership division at Family Housing Resources. He enjoys helping Pima County residents navigate their homeownership dreams. Hailing from Southern California, he attended the University of Arizona and fell in love with the warm weather and unique Tucson culture. In his free time, Nick enjoys sports, music, and traveling. Say hi, Nick.
Hey guys, thanks Shamar. Thanks Bob. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So thank you all for being here one more time. So without further ado, let's jump into our first question. And we're going to give this one to Bob. So Bob, is there a such thing as having too much money in your savings account?
Well, the short answer is actually yes. One of the things that I think we're helping young people understand is that when you start as early as we're talking with you, the ability to reach your goals becomes very easy. And in most cases, I will say that the requirements of a savings program are much less the earlier you get going. But what you have to remember, and why most people, when I was making a living at my day job, most people, young and old, who are committed to doing the right thing, I would say 90% of them had more than they needed or were saving more than they needed to reach the goals they expressed about how they want to live in retirement, how generous they want to be, and other such things. So remember, the industry has a strong incentive to hold your money and sometimes make you more scared than you should be. So you might just continue to leave it at their institutions where fees are generated. That's part of my skeptical answer. Beyond that, in general, I think most of you would say, if I asked you this question, your answer would be yes. Don't you want to save enough to live the life you want and know that you can't run out and actually be able to pay it back, pay it forward a little bit? That these days is very easily done with technology. That's the beauty of our industry. Our industry I make fun of a lot, but one of the very good things about our industry is predicting long-term outcomes is much easier. And so with a serious financial advisor, serious mentor, You can say, wow, I'm saving enough. That gives me 200 extra this month that maybe I could start saving towards a vacation I wasn't aware of. So the answer is yes, you can save too much money. We have the tools and the interest in making sure that you take advantage of every dollar and that you're not over saving. I want to add one last thing in case this question was relating to a savings account versus an investment account. An investment account is the one we do most of our teaching on. The savings account is the one that you have available for short-term emergencies. And you can also have too much money in that one. That again, there's still a pretty good rule of thumb of the 6 months of expenses into your savings account. So the answer is yes. And let's find out what those numbers are so you can decide, hey, I have a little extra now. In the end, isn't your goal to simply save enough and enjoy the rest? In other words, I want to have a good quality of life while I am saving for my future goals. That's the trick. Let's find that middle ground.
Great. Thank you, Bob. So we're going to jump into a biggie for Nick right off the top. How do you know when is the right time to buy a home? And what are some best practices for purchasing a home? And should I be completely debt free before doing so? So it's a lot wrapped into that question.
Sure. It's a big question, to have overall. So several factors, of course, depending on the individual or the household specifically. But what it comes down to is when your income and budget are stable, some savings, and then, as a housing counselor, hopefully when you understand the basics of the home buying process, because there is kind of a lot baked in there. And that's where, here at Family Housing Resources, we offer home buyer education. And a lot of loans require you attend home buyer education class before you purchase a home anyways. It has kind of been baked into law now to avoid some of those predatory loans that kind of ran rampant, several years ago. So that kind of the age-old question, right, is the alternative to buying is renting. So when is renting or buying right for your household? Because there are several positives and drawbacks to each one. Do you have the capital to buy? Do you have enough for additional costs not included in the mortgage, such as property taxes? Taxes are always going to be there. HOA fees and any repairs that may come along the way as an owner. That is your responsibility. So the right time also would be, the commitment to a particular neighborhood with a particular home. Is that where you want to spend, the next potentially 30 years with your family? With the renting, right, it's the flexibility of moving or not having as much responsibility to the repairs of the home. Let's see here. Second part, best practices for purchasing home and should I be completely debt free? So being completely debt free, let me see here. I'd say no, right? Because that could actually potentially even hurt your credit in getting a loan, right? Uh, Loan officer will look at the credit. You basically just want, with regards to the debt, you just want to be cognizant of your debt to income ratio, and that is how you know what you can afford. Your monthly debts divided by your monthly income, and you do not want to exceed 45%, and that's including with your mortgage. So I guess that answers the question, right?
Yep. No, absolutely. So 45% being what they should be searching for with that. How is that? Have you been seeing that being realistic lately with a lot of folks, or have they been struggling to get to that point with housing prices going up?
You know what? I guess I should add to that, right? Best practices, right? That's where you would look into down payment assistance, any type of help in your area. There's all kinds of down payment assistance programs out there because sometimes it is kind of hard, right? It's a tight squeeze, and 45% in general is the absolute max. Like you cannot push that. It's just hard numbers, right? How much money is coming in, how much money is coming out. You do the division that you have to be at 45%. So to help you with some of that, right? The down payment assistance programs, where I would advise you guys to check in with your local housing counseling agencies because these programs are very fluid. there's funds available, and then the next month there aren't funds available, or the guidelines will change. So it's a fluid process. So if you're in the market, I would suggest to like kind of keep looking into it. So the down payment assistance, if say you get 25,000, 30,000, 40,000, now you can lower the principal each month, because you're coming in a little bit more for the initial down payment, and now your debt to income ratio can kind of work in your favor now because you're paying a little less each month. And then of course it all just comes down to budgeting um, in the long run to see how much you can afford.
Thank you, Nick.
Mhm.
So now when we start thinking about investments a little bit, and Isabel, help us out with this one a little bit. As an investor, this is something that bubbled up with some of our participants in the past. What options do I have to invest in companies that align with my ethics and values?
Yeah, I love this. I love this question because I spent a lot of time working on what we call ESG investing, which is environmental, social, and governance related investing. So this is that's really the area where we think about from an investment perspective how you use your investments to reflect your values, your ethics, exactly what this question is getting at. The good news is there are a ton of options out there these days that can help you incorporate your values into your investments. That said, there's a bit of a downside to this because it means there's kind of overwhelming kind of choice overload out there. And it isn't one of those things where everything out there is necessarily a good investment. So you do have to put your kind of buyer beware hat on when you're looking at this area of investment. And there's a couple of things I remind people to keep in mind. And the biggest one is don't forget the sound investment principles that you've been trained on or are being trained on now. Make sure you keep a really close eye on things and that they're low cost, that they're diversified. These are always important to keep in mind. And then I think the part that can be a real challenge for people when this is a focus for them is remembering that a good company from an ethical or values-based perspective may not always be a good investment. Investment is about deriving financial return. And there are some really great companies out there in terms of their societal impact that may not drive great financial returns. And so going and trying to pick good companies is not a great way to get a good investment experience. You're better off probably picking a low cost, diversified investment strategy that has specific considerations for environmental or social issues. Look at those carefully, get past the marketing material and the pretty pictures of the trees and things and actually read what issues it's considering and see if those align with yours. And then the last thing I like to tell people is keep in mind that your investments is just one part of your human and financial capital and how you express aligning your values with it. You also have the opportunity to volunteer and donate, and it's not necessarily your investment portfolio's job to do all that social and environmental impact that you want to achieve with your life. Don't get so focused on that aspect that you compromise your financial future when you have all these other tools available.
That's a really good point you made about the volunteering and being able to, focus some time elsewhere as well too, versus the opportunity for investments. And one thing here at Third Decade, just a little commercial, we're going to be hopefully in the future creating additional volunteer opportunities, and we would love to have all of our alumni volunteer with Third Decade at some point in time. So thank you, Isabel. So, Gene, this is one of the questions, another question that we got from one of our participants. So, my partner and I want to buy a house. However, recently they've been thinking about investing in a rental property rather than purchasing a primary residence. What guidance do you have on this matter?
I love this question, probably because it's not as easy as one would think. There's a lot of different angles and things to think about when looking at either situation. I think the first thing is, how will you be funding the purchase of the property? Generally speaking, non-owner occupied properties or rental properties have a lower loan to value criteria. So that means that there's more down payment funds needed in order to qualify. It can be 25% or even more, depending on the loan program. The other thing is that if one's financing the property purchase, will there be sufficient income to cover the underwriting criteria of all current debt payments and the proposed mortgage payment? So generally speaking, with a non-owner occupied mortgage, when we're underwriting those, you have to have seasoned reoccurring income for cash flow purposes. This means that any future rent from the property that you're buying generally cannot be counted unless you've owned that property for 2 years. So unless you have a significant income and low debt utilization, you might be able to qualify on your own income sources, but it can be really tough to have that future rent be counted. Also, mortgage lenders may frown on approving a rental property mortgage if the borrower does not have mortgage history on their credit reports. Thus, the need to have a primary mortgage maybe before you try to get a rental property. And generally speaking, non-owner occupied mortgage rates are higher than owner occupied mortgage rates. And if I haven't flip-flopped enough on you already, the other side to consider is that it has become a little more difficult to write off primary residence mortgage interest on personal income taxes. There are limitations to the total amount of mortgage interest that can be written off each year. And most folks will end up with a standard deduction for personal income taxes. Rental property allows more deductions, mortgage interest, real estate taxes, depreciation, repairs, and maintenance. So that can lower your taxable income. But there's a double-sided sword to everything. So in a nutshell, I think it probably is best to focus on your purchasing a primary residence before you go into your entrepreneurial spirit and being a non-owner occupied owner.
Thank you, Gene. That's super helpful guidance when it comes to navigating that process. That's a tricky one, and I'm sure a lot of folks are really going through that same kind of calculus as we speak. So that's very helpful. So, Bob, something that I know that you are expert on, we want to talk about pets. So, someone asked, how should I budget for a future or current pet? Should I have an emergency fund dedicated to their expenses? And lastly, is pet insurance a scam?
Well, I'm going to pause and answer Chanel's question on the chat board and then give a little bit on pet insurance and throw it over to Isabel. We talked beforehand, and a 70-year-old is probably not a pet, and the costs of a pet are probably not in my wheelhouse. So I think I got a better answer for you. But Chanel had written about crypto. Why is it promoted so much? Who benefits from it? And is there a way to make a real profit from it? This one's simple. This is one more version. Somebody's going to tell you differently because they think they've made money in it, of what they used to call snake oil back 200 years ago. People find something that nobody knows anything about. They advertise it. They do whatever they can to make you think it's a way to get rich quick. But long-term investment people, and I'm sure Gene and Nick and Isabel feel this way, ultimately it's what we call a greater fool theory. Your question is, who benefits and is there a way to make a real profit? Yes, if you can find a greater fool than you. Because the only way someone's going to buy it is if they think it's more valuable than the price you paid. So it's got caution written all over it. It's actually gambling. I would have no problem discussing the benefits of it if we acknowledged it's gambling, because there is no business here. There is no dividends. There is no growth. So it doesn't fit a long-term portfolio. It does fit gambling. So talk about it in terms of gambling. As for pet insurance, I just have a quick story. I decided I'm gonna tell it real quick. So in the world of college football these days, they're paying college football players, and some of you are probably aware of that. So I was watching a conference the other day, and the coach was actually showing a text from a high school senior who didn't even start on his high school team. And he wrote to the coach and said, "Coach, I'd love to come and help your school. Here's my expenses." And he goes, I need 7,000 a month if you want me to come to your school. And my girlfriend and my dog are kind of expensive. And the coach just looks at the screen and he goes, "Well, I'd choose either the dog or the girlfriend because you got to cut expenses right now." And the point there was he was a gruff old guy, probably like me, going, come on, make your choices here and don't be silly about it. And so in the end, the question really means pets now to a lot of people are very expensive. And so they have to be viewed as a financial decision. And there is pet insurance. Isabel, can I have you take it from there?
Sure. I told Bob I would give a millennial answer to this since anyone who uses the term pet parent to describe themselves and their dog probably falls into the bucket of this is a great question to be asking. So yes, good to think about it as a financial decision, particularly if you do skew to that emotional side, which I know I personally do. Pets can be really expensive. And I think the thing about this is you really need to have an honest look at yourself and how you're going to treat your pet from a financial perspective, both in terms of how much money are you going to spend on the necessities, which certainly add up for something like a dog or a cat, and also how much you're going to spend on kind of the extra things that just hop into your shopping cart when you're in that pet mode. So think really carefully about how that's going to look for you. One thing I did is I fostered dogs for a local animal shelter a few years before I actually got a pet to get an idea of sort of my behavior as an adult with pets, because it's a lot different than when it's a family pet. And then you really need to think about what you're going to do financially in sort of a worst case scenario for your pet. I think that's where pet insurance comes in. From a day-to-day expense basis, taking your pet to the vet, pet insurance is generally not going to save you a lot of money. And there is a wide range in quality in pet insurance. So where you want to think about pet insurance is in how you would handle an extreme financial event with your pet. And you need to be honest with yourself that if you couldn't say no to a treatment that cost whatever amount of money, 5,000, 10,000, and that derailed your financial goals, then you probably want to think about pet insurance. That doesn't mean, of course, you have to say yes to those expenses. There are lots of responsible options when it comes to pet ownership, but be honest with yourself and make sure you don't put yourself in a situation where your care and love for your pet derails all your financial goals, because it can happen. There are some really expensive sort of scenarios out there. So hopefully, Bob, forgive me. Hopefully that wasn't too indulgent of my dog.
No, you got to know where your skill set is, and that is not mine. So thank you for that. I thought that was perfect.
That was definitely perfect, and it's great that we got a 2-for-1. So now we're going to associate crypto with pets from the rest of our lives now. All right, moving on to the next question, and we're going to throw this over to you, Gene. So I have switched jobs since being in the third decade program. What advice do you have regarding rolling over retirement accounts or leaving them where they are? My current investment options are limited, and I don't plan on being with the company long term. What's your advice?
Well, having changed employers at least 5 times in my 40 years of working myself, I'm a big believer in rolling over employee-sponsored retirement plans into a rollover retirement or investment account, a qualified investment account outside of an employer setting. Sure, it makes sense, for matching to invest with your current employer, but don't bring in other funds that you have from previous employers or other investment accounts. And let me tell you a little story. Hopefully this will make sense. So I had left an employer about 22 years ago, and I totally forgot that there was a cash pension plan and a retirement plan that I had there. I thought it had kind of just gone by the wayside as the one employer had gone bankrupt in 2008. And I thought, oh, well, any funds that I was due were gone. lo and behold, one day I get a letter in the mail, and it advises me that the bank that acquired the assets of that company, they had $75,000 worth of a combination of 401k funds and my cash pension plan balance, and that they needed to get me a check for it because they no longer wanted to be responsible for holding on to that. So the reason why I share this is it really made me wonder how many of these situations where funds go unclaimed in the US when an employer cannot track you down or your heirs. And if the funds sit stagnant or dormant for an extended period of time, there are some state laws that require that investment company or bank to escheat the funds to the state. Escheatment is where dormant accounts for an extended period of time, and the rules vary from state to state. That's where they have to send those unclaimed funds to the state. Now, that process in some states causes a liquidation of the plan, which can have serious tax implications, penalties, and loss of earning potential for you or your heirs once you find out that the funds exist or they find out after your demise. So although many employers allow their employees to roll over funds from other companies, retirement plans into their own, I would strongly recommend against it. Firstly, most employers have a plan administrator or an investment firm, and they sometimes offer a very limited number of investment options. Using a third-party firm could open up many options to you for diversification. And also, since most employer plans do not come with free advice, the manner in which funds are invested is up to you, whether you're a novice or a pro. So make it easy on yourself and your heirs. Rolling old plans into an account with an investment advisor or a bank makes sense so that everything can be held with one or two companies. And that's kind of my stance on it.
That's very helpful, Gene. And I can just to add from an employer's perspective, we do not like to hold employees who have separated money into our account that long if we don't have to. So from an employer perspective, we definitely would like for folks to roll those over as soon as possible once you leave the company as well. So for all those who have their own businesses out there, I'm sure you may be experiencing some of that same thing too. All right. So next one is going to be for Isabel. So as a 30-something who recently finished graduate school, I would like to catch up on investing in retirement funds. How can I balance this with the financial responsibilities at this stage of life, such as buying a house, a car, caring for parents, or etc.?
This is, I think, can be a really challenging question to answer generally. It can depend a lot on your situation and how urgent and pressing those commitments are at this time in your life, and what resources you have to work with. This also hits on all of the panelists' areas I know of expertise. So, of anyone else, welcome to jump in. But I'll give you my take, which is that the most important thing you can do is find a way to start investing for retirement. One of the first things you want to do, and you've probably heard this before, is make sure that if your employer has a match in their 401k or other savings programs, that you're taking advantage of that. If at all possible, you're not leaving that match money on the table. And then I think in the other types of accounts that you may want to be saving in for retirement, try to take away the barriers to getting started, get the account open, get a low cost diversified fund in there, and start chipping away at it. You have to balance the need to, of course, get things like your emergency savings locked in. And there are, of course, lots of family demands, but with the power of compounding, when we're talking about something like saving for retirement, every dollar you can save now is going to make up so much more of your future ability to consume income in retirement. So it's really important to start chipping away at it, and you don't feel bad if that's in little amounts, because with compounding, that's going to become really meaningful numbers when you hit retirement.
Thank you, Isabel.
Can I pitch in a little bit there?
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I forget to say this is actually one of the extra questions too. I think it's helpful for everyone to remember that when expenses are rising and your income's still low, I'm assuming the reason you go to grad school is to do better for yourself on income down the road. And so while it looks like it's delaying things, you probably chose to do it so that you could do better. So you just need to adjust your thinking that I'm not able to save as much as I would like, but I will be able to soon. In other words, the investment in yourself is what I don't want you to forget about. We talk about the stocks and the bonds. You are the most valuable asset you have. You made a good choice investing in yourself for grad school. The trade-off was a delay in traditional retirement vision, so to speak. That's okay. Make sure I would much rather make yourself indispensable and very valuable in the workplace and be delayed on my retirement than the other way around. So I like what you've done. Relax. I think you're in good shape. And again, because you're still 30s, that is still very young financially. You, with your own personal value going up in the marketplace, your income will go up. You'll be able to so-called catch up much quicker than you feel like right now.
That's perfect, Bob. Thank you. Nick, I want to talk a little bit about housing affordability. So someone asked, having 20% down for a house seems so far out of reach. And I know that's probably something a lot of our graduates are feeling at this point in time. So what should I be aiming for when it comes to a reasonable down payment and related expenses?
Yeah, of course, 20% of a purchase price of a home is a whole lot of money. Um, so there are a few type of loans you can get, right? There's conventional loans, FHA loans, and then USDA loans for rural areas, and then VA loans for veterans, of course. So with the VA loan and USDA loan, there's no down payment assistance, 0% down. But if those two are not options, of course, the main two we look at is conventional and an FHA loan. An FHA loan is government backed. So with the conventional loan, it's ideal if possible. And you can still get a conventional loan even without the 20% down completely. You can do a little less than that. You just have to pay mortgage insurance because you're not coming up with a full 20%. You're going to pay a little bit more each month instead as like an insurance. So the other option, right, is the FHA loan. That's 3.5% down, which is much more manageable. But it will cost a little bit more each month because again, you're not putting the same type of capital up front. And this is also where the down payment assistance, of course, comes in because 20% down doesn't even include the closing costs, which can be another like 4%. So that's where you want to seek to get some kind of down payment assistance that's out there if possible. Um, and then another way is there's seller concessions towards the end of the home buying process. You can negotiate with the seller some concessions to pay some closing costs and maybe drive some of those costs down. But yeah, so if you don't have the 20%, you can look to get a conventional loan with maybe a higher credit score above 640. If you have a lower credit score, but you really think it's time for you to buy a home, you want to get at least a 620, but FHA will work with you with 600, 580 about the very least. And then 3.5% down is much more manageable. For example, on a $250,000 home, FHA loan at 3.5% is 87 or $8,750, which is much more reasonable than the full 20%. And with down payment assistance, a lot of those programs are like at least $15,000, $20,000, and that can cover a lot of those costs.
And Nick, just a quick follow up. I'm assuming that most folks that you're seeing are not putting down the 20% right now, right? They're trying to get into vehicles where it's a little bit, whether either FHA or conventional or the USDA, where they can get a significant relief when it comes to that down payment, I'd imagine.
Yeah, so we do work with a lot of FHA loans, but also conventional as well. And a cool thing with, because a lot of our work goes into down payment assistance, people are seeking that. There's help out there. So people come to us, they're seeking to us for guidance. In some cases, say you have a little bit, right? The down payment assistance can push you from an FHA loan to a conventional loan. So like you wouldn't be able to get that conventional loan on your own, but now since you apply for the program and these funds are reserved for you, you talk to your lender, hey, I got this coming in. Now you're getting pushed into a conventional loan, which is now you're paying less each month because you come up with the full 20%. Um, we don't really work too much with rural applicants because Tucson isn't considered rural, and I'm not sure where that would be, to be honest. But a couple of VA loans, of course, when some veterans apply.
Mm.
Um, but FHA and conventional for the most part. But because conventional is ideal, I don't want to stigmatize FHA loan at all. It's a great option. It's just it comes with some give and take,
Absolutely. Thank you.
of course.
So, Bob, back to you. Is having whole or universal life insurance or something similar ever a good idea? Or is it primarily a financial scam, which some people think, sold by people who earn commissions?
Well, yeah, it gets a lot of bad press and a lot of it is justified, but it's not a scam. It has worked very well for a lot of people and some of my partners at TCI. It was never a world we got into because the world has changed in the investment in the life insurance side in the last 20, 30 years. So this, when it was started, the access to low cost, good mutual funds and investing was very, very low. Most investors didn't have enough money to really even get started. So the insurance people developed this product which said, look, you're young, you're starting a family, you have a spouse, you need life insurance, and you also need an automatic savings plan. So this forced people, the good part of a whole and universal life was it was forced savings for people that probably never would have had money. I've seen it too often to tell you that it was bad. The problem with it is it's too expensive. There are a lot of charges. So if you want to force yourself into a savings plan, and I have to say, for some people that I've known through the years, that was worth the cost because they would not have ended up with the money they had without a forced savings program. So I have seen that it does work. Basically anymore, it's not appropriate for just even a beginning educated person like you all in the world of finance. You can buy life insurance separately, term, take care of your life insurance needs very cheaply, and then invest your money, and you're going to end up with a lot more money because you're putting a lot less towards costs. And in the old days was buy term life and invest the difference. So if you were putting $250 in whole life a month, you ended up with money. That was a good thing because a lot of people never would have. That's what I'm telling you. It's not a scam. I would just view it, if you choose to use it, as, look, this is the only way I'm ever going to save money and I need the life insurance. And I would view the returns from this product as a savings account type return, a bond-like return. They will tell you that you might get stock market returns. That just won't happen because of the cost. So no, it's not a scam. I do think with just any comfort at all in the markets, buy your term life as a young person or a young family and invest your money the way you're being taught at third decade.
That's super helpful, Bob. Thank you.
Mhm.
Isabel, what do you suggest the next investment account be after maxing out a Roth IRA and a 401k? And how does taxation on a brokerage account work?
Well, first of all, this is a great position to be in, particularly if you're young. I think this means you're doing a lot of things right, and you should be really proud of yourself. If you're not there yet, that also doesn't mean you're doing things wrong. This is like one of the things we're all working to. So, what to do next? It depends a little bit on your personal situation, what other future spending goals that you have for you and your family. Couple of things to keep in mind. There are some other type of tax advantaged accounts out there that may be appropriate for your situation, depending on what those your kind of your life and family looks like. 529s, college savings plans are a good example of that. They have some good flexibility that has just come out, which it can be complicated to navigate. So anyone in this situation is starting to get to a place where working with an advisor and a tax advisor may be a good idea. But if you have children that you expect to send to college and help them pay for that college, 529 may be good. If you're planning to have children, there's actually ways you can start a 529 and then transfer it to other family members later on. So that has some flexibility. If you use a high deductible health insurance plan, you may have the option to use an HSA. Those can be really tax powerful because you're not getting taxed on the money you put in, you're not getting taxed on the growth of those funds, which can be invested. And if you pull that money out for eligible types of health spending, that can you're not going to get taxed on that either. And you can leave that if you can budget elsewhere for your health spending, you can have that money build up over time and retire in investments. And it can become another retirement vehicle with you with all those tax benefits. And then you can use it on health costs when you're retired, which, given how most people's health spending looks in their elder years, you're probably going to be able to find good ways to put that money to work. So those are still kind of in that tax advantage space, different types of accounts that may be appropriate. And then what the question is getting at with a brokerage account, of course, you can look to open a kind of a taxable, if you will, investment account. Now, I'm not a tax advisor, so I can't give very specific tax advice, but I think the way this question is being asked, there's already good awareness of the big thing you need to keep in mind is that these types of accounts are taxable. This means you're going to want to think a little bit differently and carefully about the tax implications of different types of investments that you're putting in, because how they generate income and gains will result in taxes that you need to pay over time and on an annual basis. So that's things you can look at with your advisor or your accountant there, and just be thoughtful. There are different types of investments you may want to prioritize in your accounts that are a little bit more tax efficient. I know there might be a few other panelists with thoughts on that too. So.
Great answer. I'm glad you got to the HSA. I think it's down there too. I am 70. I have an HSA and I have a debit card. So I go to Walgreens and buy aspirin and NyQuil and take it out of my tax deductible, tax earning, tax-free account. It's the greatest feeling in the world. And so it technically, I think Isabel basically was saying this, when people say, I've kind of maxed out my Roth 401k, by the way, we want third decaders thinking about, then your next thing is, let's look at the HSA and get it going. It is triple tax-free, basically, is what we're saying. So nice answer, Isabel. Well done. That is a little bit under the radar kind of product these days.
Thank you both. Last question before we throw it over to Nikita to see if there's any questions in the chat. But Gene, can you talk a little bit about mortgage points and the decision process around buying them?
Absolutely. Buying your rate down or paying points both means that you're paying an extra fee to get a lower rate generally. This fee can be called origination fee or points on your loan quote. To determine whether buying down your rate, also known as paying points, makes sense, you have to calculate how long it takes your monthly interest cost savings to repay the cost of the points. So for example, I just moved to Southern California from Portland, Oregon. And yes, I traded in a 30-year fixed rate mortgage from 2020 at 2.75 for a wonderful 6.625 30-year mortgage in California. When I negotiated the contract to purchase my home in California, I didn't want to pay a lot of my own money towards additional closing costs. But what I was able to negotiate was that the seller agreed to pay 2% of the sales price in closing costs on my behalf. So this amounted to roughly $14,000. I ended up utilizing 7,000 of that to buy down my mortgage rate from 7 1/8 to 6.625. And it essentially did not cost me anything because the seller paid for it. Why would anyone want to do this? More important to me was to have a bit lower mortgage payment each month. A lower rate equals generally a lower payment. You pay this cost up front. Now, when rates drop to a better level, I will need to consider how much was paid in points, along with the cost of refinancing, as to which rate option will provide the best outcome for me. You want to make sure that you can recoup those costs in the interest savings each month in a reasonable amount of time. Most economists have said they believe the mortgage rates will drop in a more reasonable 4 to 5% rate, probably in the next 2 to 3 years. And given the savings in mortgage payment interest over the next 2 years versus what it would be at higher interest rates shows that I break even after 2 years of holding the mortgage versus the $7,000 price tag. So I hope that helped answer the question. It's a lot of detail.
No, that was great, Gene. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and take an opportunity now to go over to the chat and the Q&A where we've had a few questions come in. We did have one student ask a question. Said, how do I know if my retirement savings, if I have retirement savings from my previous employer? And Gene shared in the chat, but I'm not sure that everybody can see it. You can contact the employer or the company that managed the plan. HR or employee relations at that company can be very helpful. And the other option is that most states have a website in which you can search for funds that they're holding. After proving your identity, you can claim those funds. So for anybody wondering, that is the answer to Lilia's question. As far as for our panelists to answer after that, we have someone who's asking, for those that are familiar with the thrift savings plan, they'd love to know if you would recommend combining a Roth IRA that sits outside the thrift savings plan with the TSP. The fees are very low, even though the fund options are somewhat limited.
Yeah, I do know the TSP plan. And for convenience, I think that's a fine, in this case, keeping in mind what Gene said, more often than not, you're going to find higher fees. In the case of the TSP, they've really upped their game. Their choices are very good. And so consolidation has a value. So I am quite comfortable with that thought.
Great. I'm learning something new every day too. Thanks. All right. What is your best advice for someone whose expenses have been exceeding their income?
I can jump in on this one. There's a lot of different resources that are available to folks in this predicament. Sometimes bad things happen to good people, and you need to utilize the resources that are out there. So the first step I would recommend is consider some type of consumer credit counseling. You want to make sure that you're utilizing a nonprofit organization that provides this coaching, and they also act as a mediary between you and the creditor. They try to negotiate down the monthly payment so that maybe they take a lower interest rate or they eliminate the interest so that you can make them whole. And what that does for you is generally it ends up when you are in consumer credit counseling, it keeps your credit relatively intact. Whereas if you allow the debt to charge off, or if you file bankruptcy, it can have probably a lot more of a negative impact. Now, I do want to throw out that bankruptcy is an option. It's become a little bit more difficult to just walk away from debt in a bankruptcy. Usually they try to make you go through a restructuring of your debt through the plan first. which means that the lender is going to take a lower amount, and then you pay that money to the courts on a monthly basis, usually through payroll deduction or some other means, and then they make those payments on your behalf, a negotiated balance down. I would consider that a last resource, but definitely before you allow something to charge off. Or if you do have something charge off and then you seek bankruptcy, that's advisable as well.
Thank you very much, Gene. We have another participant who is asked what % of their income they should put towards a 529 if they intend to start one for each of their children. Let's assume in this case they are already meeting their retirement goals and they still have more funds to be able to put towards that.
I'll take a first shot at it. My answer always was, well, tell me, what is your goal for your child? Is it to pay for the entire college expense, no matter where they go? Is it to, I'll cover 4 years of an in-state college? And you get some interesting answers there. Once you do that, then you do the math. And if we're saying, I want to do half of what an in-state college, the tools are wonderful these days. We know what Boston University costs. We know what Pima County costs. We plug that through and say, all right, here's how much you need to save in those programs. Now, the new piece to that, Nikki, is I think you know, and Isabel is nodding her head. There's a beauty to 529s now. There used to be a little bit of a fear of overfunding. Now you have one of the great things that the government has done in this world is allowed you, if you graduate college and you haven't spent all your 529, you can convert currently up to 35,000 of it to a Roth IRA. What is a better start for a 21-year-old coming out of school than $35,000 in a Roth IRA? So it's a wonderful vehicle. So you don't have to be as scared of overfunding it. So if the person has the resources and their goal is 4 years of an in-state college, your mentor can help run the numbers. That is a simple computation anymore. And here's how much you need to save to have X amount for your current 5-year-old child.
Thank you.
And just to add on to that real quick, I want to repeat that kind of came up in one of our other sessions this week, and some really great advice that you should not necessarily feel bad also if you can't fund a 529 to the length and the extent that you want to. There is a million scholarships out there. You just have to spend time really thinking about what is your strategy to fund your kids when they get of age. And if you can't get to the 529, the amount that you feel you would like to have, just be heartened that if you make it a job, there are a million scholarships out there that can really help draw down some of that college expense as you move forward.
Great.
Or maybe they could
One
sell the
thing.
pets. Oh, sorry, I couldn't resist. All right, I'm out.
Oh, I was just gonna note, it's not really in this question because I think this is about your own savings rate and it's a good problem to have. But if you do have like family members or people who are looking to give children money, I believe some of the gift tax exemption limits do apply with 529. So just make sure you keep an eye, you keep an eye on that if you're getting into the bigger sums of money with other people.
Great point.
And Nikki, I think if we can answer this last question really quickly, so I don't know if you can read that.
Yeah, so someone says they just received a significant lump sum of money, and asking for the best advice on how to invest it. They already have a Roth IRA and their plan is to max that first. They want to know what should they do with the rest of it.
Oh, Bob, I think you're on mute.
Yeah. So it's investment question. So I always like that. That's a great question. Kind of the order of how to invest. I think what I usually tell young people is, if you have so much money, here's the order, in my opinion. First is the Roth 401k, not the Roth IRA. The Roth IRA is third. Coming second when you have money is that HSA that Isabel was talking about. And then third is that traditional Roth IRA that we all kind of grew up with. But now there are 2 other type of investment accounts that I think are better. I'm assuming, of course, that people are looking at their 529 expenses, et cetera, and college and housing and all of that. But when you have an extra dollar to save, mine is one, Roth 401k, two, HSA. And if you've capped out those two, by golly, frankly, you should just call us and we're going to have a heck of a celebration. And then after that, it becomes your traditional Roth IRA, the one that we help fund for our third decaders. That's actually the third best place to add money to.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, we've reached time, and I just really want to say thank you all, the panelists, for really joining us today. This was some great discussion, some great tidbits. I learned a lot, as Nikki said, she did as well too. I just really appreciate you taking some time out to help our alumni and our current participants really get some of these burning questions answered. Hopefully, this is something that we can start doing every year, and we just really appreciate your time, energy, and effort put into this. So thank you all.
Yes.
Now, one last piece of wrap up. We are going to be starting our Q3 classes in July. So, as a commercial for all those who are still with us, tell your friends, family, coworkers, whoever, sign up for Third Decade to be able to experience the experiences that you all have had with Third Decade to be a part of our family. So, please feel free to do that. Send them to our website. And we are excited to get more and more young people into our program. So, again, thank you to the panel and thank you all for coming out tonight. Everyone have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.